streaming?
So I just pushed the go live button. So theoretically, we should be I think I shared screen. Yes, I did. So
how do we, so you said we can click on that and it should show up, show stream on YouTube.
And I'm guessing we can be heard right now.
Yeah.
Yep, that was just fine.
There it is.
It's this is like a regular show. It's like
the go
there's
live button. So theoretically,
Here we go. Turn that off. Yeah, it's about 20 seconds behind.
yeah, well, you know, that's like just your opinion, man.
All right, so welcome to the Audio Opinion Show, where audio people gather and have opinions about things. That's pretty much the entire shtick. There's not a whole lot more to it than that. I'm joined by some of my oldest friends and some of my newest friends. Some I've known for 45 years, some I've known for 45 minutes, but we're just gonna sit around and chat for an hour about audio stuff. And if that's the kind of thing that you like to watch, then feel free to hang out with us. And if it's not, I'm sure somewhere there's a Facebook post that needs to be ranted about. So have at it. I've got a kind of a cross section of folks here. We're mostly usually sound reinforcement people, although we're not doing that now because there aren't any audiences showing up, but we still can have opinions about things. So we're going to start this thing out. And the first thing that we do is we figure out how to do a poll. And so we're going to have our first poll question. And that first poll question is going to get launched right now. And the question is, what is the greatest movie of all time? Now, I did change the options. There are multiple choice options. You can select more than one option. And since the audience in YouTube can't see the options, I'll read them off really quick. The options are The Princess Bride, 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 or not The Princess Bride. So these are the options. You can select more than one if you'd like. Because it's a multiple choice, I'm not sure if everyone's voted, so I'm just gonna kind of do a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, and end it. And we will see how many of you are wrong. So apparently there are 6 evil, wrong people that voted not The Princess Bride. Now, it does appear that we got somewhere along the line of 47 votes. So I'm just going to assume that everyone that voted not The Princess Bride also voted The Princess Bride. And I'll like give you, I don't know, a cookie or something because you didn't completely screw it up and get it wrong. Okay. So I don't know if I did the sharing part right, but anyway. I didn't, but it is, here it is now.
It's shared. You're good.
Okay. So now let's go ahead and go on to our topic. Actually, before I do that, so the Audio Opinion Show is something that I started a long time ago and kind of only kind of ran out of steam late last year. And then I had several of my friends bugging me to start this thing back up again. So I started the thing back up again. So if you haven't seen it, you don't know what we're doing. We just are hanging out, kind of talking about the things in audio that are subjective, which is almost all of the things. And it's just a time to, you know, kind of hang out and have fun. We did a bunch of these before. We talked about a bunch of topics, but I decided, since we're restarting this thing after months and months and months, to just kind of start over as if we hadn't talked about anything. And so we're going to do a quick poll here, and the poll is going to be figuring out what we're going to talk about. And so the poll says, so what's your favorite blank and why? And these are very generic, intentionally kind of stupid things. So what's your favorite? I'll read them off real quick for the YouTube folks. What's your favorite mic pre? What's your favorite drum microphone? What's your favorite vocal microphone? What's your favorite mixing console? What's your favorite loudspeaker system? What's your favorite piece of audio gear? What's your favorite audio job? What's your favorite venue to mix in? What's your favorite gig story, which could get interesting? And last but not least, what's your favorite comms system? And this one, there you only get one vote. So I only see 3 votes, so I will wait until we get a quorum because I don't get to vote. But we've got about 10 of us here. So some of these things we have talked about before, but that's okay. We can talk about them again. It does appear that we may have a clear winner. Still waiting for 2 more votes. I don't want anybody's vote to not get counted. That was apparently an issue, I think, in the past. So this is something that we concentrate on in this country, is making sure that all the votes get counted. Okay, all the votes are counted. All the votes are counted. Everything is in, and we're going to end the poll. We're going to share the results so everybody sees it. And today we're going to talk about, which actually I enjoy this topic. What's your favorite audio job? What's the favorite thing, favorite role you like to play when you're doing audio? So it could be an A2, A1, comms guy, RF guy, system tech, stagehand, whatever it is that, you know, a sound designer, anything that you like. So I'm going to start off by randomly picking Jason, and we'll get Jason to to kick us off as to what his, and it can be not the thing that you normally do, Jason, because I know what you do most of the time, but like, what's your, you know, or even historically, what was like one of the favorite like roles that you like to do?
I like to mix front of house, even though I mixed monitors for the majority of my career. And the reason for that is mixing front of house is a lot more personally artistic than mixing monitors. And I have never, other than my own bands when I was young, mixed a studio mix. I'm sure I would enjoy that just as much. But I enjoyed the whole process of choosing microphones to suit the sources, tuning the PA, and then manipulating sounds, which is really just my favorite thing in the whole world.
Well, when you were mixing monitors, you did in-ears, didn't you?
Yeah, predominantly. I mean,
so that's
I had my share of Wiejaczka as well, but yeah, but see, with monitors, you are subject to the whims of the person that you're mixing for. Most of the mixes of musicians in my entire life, which is hundreds and hundreds of musicians, their mixes sounded to me like crap, but it was what they needed to do their job, you know, to have their own proper reference for what they were playing and what they perceived around them. Whereas the content of art in those mixes was minimal. I couldn't make an acoustic sound silky if I felt like it should sound silky for the song.
Because if the artist doesn't want silky, if silky wasn't what they wanted, then that's not what I will say. But the plus side to being able to do in-ears is that at least there's a target that you can hit, that you know you hit it, as opposed to, you know, 5,000 people and almost everybody loved it and 4 guys line up and want to punch you in the face because.
Well, and there also, you have that freedom from feedback. Feedback is no longer there waiting behind you to kick you in the butt.
That's why I've learned to love mixing TV.
Yeah.
No feedback.
Yeah. Right. So that was immense freedom with in-ears. But, you know, if even as far as panning choices and every minute detail was centered around the person you were tailoring it for, which, you know, that's a satisfying professional career as well. You know, I loved it when the guys came off the stage grinning and saying it sounded amazing tonight. But I never felt as fulfilled doing that as I did when I was at front of house, making the horn section sound huge and the pipe organ sound rattle the seats, and, you know, all those satisfying things that go along with that.
So, okay. No one even interrupted Jason once. I don't know where all these polite people came from, but holy crap. Okay, go ahead, Mac.
No, I interrupted Jason.
That's true. No, that's true. So kudos to Mac. Usually it's like when we get a group that's this large, I have to kind of say, okay, everybody, don't step on people too much because, it might get a little bit more unruliness would be fine with me. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I also love live sound and have some background in doing that sort of stuff. I did the sound meditation San Francisco massive sound healing events at like Grace Cathedral and things like that. But I was just thinking about this, like, what are my really favorite sort of audio jobs? And one of them is, I have two. One would be recording ambiences, like just standing out there in the morning, recording some ducks or something like that. Who wouldn't, that's the vibe. The other one is actually
Recording ducks. The thing is, it's like, it sounds like I'm making fun of you, but the reality is I'm thinking that sounds really nice. Like I know that, and Jesse, I'm definitely going to toss back and let you finish. So sorry about that. But I know that's what, that's Dan Dugan's like passion is like, going out, and some of his recordings are amazing, like just absolutely so cool. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, it's just like soul feeding kind of work, and if you get that kind of work, it's great. And I'm kind of done with dealing with crusty clients and stuff like that. So the other one is working with theater, actually live theater. There's this like huge creative momentum that the actors have, and it's really fun to ride that wave and learn the songs and learn all the different parts, and it's complex and challenging, and it's just a great time.
Yeah, the theater mixing was always one of those things that I've never had a chance to do it. I've never had a chance to do it at a level where I could actually get results that I was even remotely happy with, because it was always under budget, or it was a one-off, or and so it was crap. I can sort of kind of hear everybody and go. But an actually well-designed theatrical show that I can track and have enough rehearsals to actually does sound like it would be really a cool thing. Another person, anyone? Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to chime in. I got to do kind of almost that thing where you have the one-off. It was a one-off event. It was in a tent in December in the Northeast, a musical. It was 10 performances of a 1-hour thing for a corporate job.
It was this last December?
No. Like 4 years ago, something like that.
But still, but then it was in December. I hope there was heat.
Yes, there was. And in fact, there was so much heat that the moisture in the air started condensing on the roof of the tent and then raining back down on us. It was great. Indoor weather, it's always a great thing.
Hands up for everyone who has worked in a large tent and had it rain inside the tent. Good times. This is why we do sound, kids, because we can get rain inside a tent.
I've done in a tent where there was a snowstorm going outside, and then it was like a tennis dome, like one of those inflatable buildings. And it was great checking the podium because you would hear the snow sliding off the roof. So I could be up there voicing the lectern for the front of house guy, and then be able to say, "Thank you, next slide, please." And you're a bunch of snow come off the roof, So yeah. Anyway, carry on.
The fact that gig, I got to do 10 runs of it, definitely gave me that little taste of like, oh, this is getting better this time. Like, this is starting to feel good over the course of, it was only over the course of a weekend. So it was like 2-3 days, a bunch of these short performances. But it was nice because they kind of let us in through the process of it, and it became less of, oh, you're the sound guy for this, and you're like, no, like, help be the designer for this, otherwise it's not going to be any good. So I got to have that, like, create a little bit of creative input and really kind of design it and own that rig, and it was a very, very satisfying experience. And that was my only it's the only theater gig I've done, but that's definitely something that I look back, I'm like, I would do more of that, even in a tent.
Were they professional actors, Aram?
Yes.
Yeah,
they hired in a directorial team and actors. They kind of mixed it up. They had a couple like heavy hitters, some a couple people that have done Broadway stuff. The stage manager was a Broadway guy. The director had done Broadway stuff, as well as a couple of the actors, and then a couple up and coming people. And just kind of made like a musical review, and it was neat. It was like a mix of tracks and live band and, you know, the actors and tap and world music and basically a little bit of everything, which was the perfect like intro to doing theater, because it was like, oh cool, you're going to figure out how to coordinate with the wardrobe department to make, you know, the tap rigs work, and just every different piece of it I got to touch, which was really neat.
I got to participate and volunteer at one time in college, a production in the round of Into the Woods, and our university's theater had a 4-zone overhead speaker installation, and at 20 years old, I got to do that once, where you followed as the chorus would dance through the venue, follow them around with the PA. And it was very exciting, unlike anything I've done before or since.
Huh.
So yeah, theater's cool.
Has anyone done corporate with theater where the actors have been people from the corporation that are doing a skit? And hands
up if we've enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's like it's the worst.
They gravitate straight to the first PA cabinet they can find and put their lav in it.
Oh, yes. It's not just that,
and then whisper.
I've been present for that a couple of times, and one time it was a Welcome Back Cotter themed sketch where the guys from whatever department were talking about why their product was better than, you know, everybody else's product. And at the rehearsal on Saturday evening after it was great. They killed. It was really funny. And then on Sunday morning, when everybody wandered in, hungover and everything else, these guys stank the joint out. They were mumbling their lines. They just didn't have whatever it took to be out there in front of people because they weren't professional actors. So yeah, it killed on Saturday night.
Well, and that's the difference between the professionals and amateurs, is that the professionals can actually go out and party like crazed fiends on Saturday night until 5 a.m. and then still do a matinee and still nail it. Which to their defense, I suspect that a lot of the corporate folks that we're talking about could do their jobs that way. Like they could go out and party like fiends until 5 a.m., go home, take a shower, throw some cologne on, and like go to work and like function. So, it's probably a little bit much to expect them to like acting on top of that.
On a related note, and I've said this before on this show probably, but the two words that strike fear in my heart more than any other are employee band. And I know a lot of you know what I'm talking about. And I will just say this one story really quick. I was doing a gig at a major social media company here in the Bay Area, and it was a tent gig.
Wait, the Bay Area, do you have big social media companies in San Francisco? No,
not in San Francisco. They're a little south of here, in Silicon Valley. But I'll just say that it was one of those companies. But anyway.
So it's a startup, one of those little startups that we've never heard of. Understood.
So they were having a big Friday party. And it's a very young company, by the way. So like it was just lots and lots of donuts and like, the station with Mexican food and the station with Chinese food. And they had remote control cars that they could drive around and play with, and lots of beer pong. But they had an employee band up there, and I'm trying to mix them through the corporate PA, which I knew was going to be, actually we had an extra PA, but it was mostly corporate-ish equipment. I'll just say that. And a mixture of SM58s and like those JBL Eons for monitors. It was terrible. But the head of AV for that company kept coming up to me and going, turn it down. And I would oblige. And the third time he came around, he's like, you have got to turn this down. And I say, look at my faders. I think the only thing I had up was like kick and vocals or something like that. And I pointed to the stage. I said, it's them. And he's like, oh, okay.
I had a gig once doing was People for the American Way, which was Norman Lear's political action committee, and they would have a big fundraiser every year, and they would always have a dinner band, usually the Peter Dushin Orchestra. And so we had Peter Dushin and we had some Scottish singer, I forget her name. Anyway, they see this big PA that we've put up for the after dinner act, and they decide that we want them to play loud. So they start playing loud, and it's just unbearable. And Norman Lear comes back to me and says, "You got to turn it down. I've got Walter Cronkite sitting right in the front of the stage, and this can't go on." And
that's just the way it is.
I pointed to the console just as you did, and the only thing that was up was Peter Dushin's piano and his vocal mic, where he talked to the audience. He didn't even sing. He just chatted with the audience in between songs. And I pointed to the console and said, nothing's on. It's all off. And he said, "I'll take care of it." And he walked up on stage in the middle of dinner while they're playing away, fired the band.
Well, that solved the problem.
I had that happen to
Peter
me
Dushin.
a year and a
He
half
whispered
ago.
in his ear. Peter Dushin turned around. The rest of the band got up and went home. Peter Dushin played piano for the rest of the night.
We had
and the worst is when you're a musician and you got to listen to that stuff. They're up there playing Hack and Proud Mary after you spent your whole life perfecting Van Halen.
Yeah.
It's like for hours.
Some of them can be good though. I mean, there's a
Sometimes.
couple clients I've seen where, if you have the right attitude towards the executive band, they're going to hire you back again.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason, maybe. It's
But how
because
many
you made them
times-
sound very good.
How many times can you hear Mustang Sally done really poorly?
Yeah, good point.
Bingo.
The trick is that I did one employee band and they were smart. The three executives who were in the front, two guitars and a bass player or whatever. They hired two guitars and a keyboard player. They hired a real bass player and a real drummer.
So they
made
got
all
ringers,
the difference.
basically.
They got ringers, and that made all the difference in the world. And man, they went over big. The employees loved them, and they just because no one really realizes. Most people don't realize that can make or break the band right there. We all know that.
Also,
absolutely.
costumes. We had a Kiss band one time. They were actually really good, and they were fully decked. They were fully kissed out. It was awesome.
Fully kissed out is now the phrase of the day. We are fully kissed out. Ross, I've seen you try to jump in 3 times. I'm going to make all these old farts shut up and listen to you.
Well, I have an employee band story from about 10 years ago, and my business partner, who I won't throw him under the bus by saying his name, but he was doing a show in Vegas for a restaurant chain, and one of the executives was friends with Collective Soul. And for their banquet awards night, they called up Collective Soul. I think it was a last minute thing. They brought him in. This was sort of shoehorned into this corporate event. And it went great. So the executive sat in on drums and I think maybe another one on bass. The rest of Collective Soul played. And everyone loved it. And then the next week we get a call from the production company saying, "Hey, we're reviewing the records and we're about to send them to the client, but there's no instruments in this video record. It's just the vocals." And unfortunately, my mentor, my partner, he had thrown this together so quickly when the band showed up that none of the instruments made it to the record bus, just vocals. So thankfully vocals went, and we're like, all right, what are we going to do? And we also play in a band, of course, because we're sound guys. And we're like, we're gonna have to dub in the instruments. So we had a little studio going at our shop, and so we're watching the record back, and I play the drums, but it's this executive playing the drums, and he's not Collective Soul's drummer, and he's kind of a jazz guy. He's playing, matchstick riff, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I better play what it looks like he was playing, or should I play what Collective Soul would have played to kind of help him out a little bit? And so I did that, and then we redubbed the video, sent it to the client. Everyone was happy, didn't hear anything. And then I think like 2 years later, that executive mentioned offhand on the convention 2 years later, he goes, "By the way, thanks for the help on the drums. I know you sweetened it a little bit.
Sweetened it. It got sweetened. It
Yes.
got completely replaced. It got sweetened. Yeah. It's whatever.
So let that be a cautionary tale about making sure everything goes to your record bus.
And dub when necessary.
And dub when necessary. Yeah, the first real big broadcast gig that I did was the Hispanic Heritage Awards at Kennedy Center, and they threw me in a truck, and I really just barely knew what I was doing in a truck. The console was a PM3000, yay, that had not been zeroed out. So that's my defense. In my defense, the console had not been zeroed out. And then they decided they wanted a jillion ISOs, which again, I'm a neophyte broadcast guy, not really used to doing that, but I managed to get everything going in all the right places, except that there was a pre-fader send from two of the lavs that was on everything.
Oops.
And it's like they I do think there was a clean program record that was okay, but as far as like all their ISOs, like all the ISOs ended up
Just
having
had a hair dryer and recorded on it.
basically, people fumbling around backstage and and everybody cussing out the guy on stage on the side, whatever, like was on pretty much all the ISO records. And yeah, I didn't get asked back the next year. But I think, Dave, you've probably done that. Did you ever do the Hispanic Heritage Awards at the Kennedy Center?
Yeah, I've done actually front house for that once or twice.
Yeah, and I really, really should have been inside. Like I had no business. And certainly at that point in my career, I had no business being in the truck. But they were like, "Oh, well, you're like the main A1 guy. Go, the truck's what matters." Oh, anyway, hire a guy that knows what they're doing, because it's probably not me. I love how we have completely rabbit trailed off of what's your favorite gig to do, but I don't care. That's part of the fun. Andy, I haven't checked my spot list, but you may be the only one that hasn't already piped in here. So I'm going to put you on the spot, co-host man, and make you co-host me a little bit. And
trying to learn how to push buttons and things in Zoom kind of distracted me quite a bit there. I have no idea.
And you can go back to the original question, or you can freaking jump off of what we were just doing. The original question was like, what's your favorite gig to do, audio job to do? But I don't care. You can also just tell your favorite Canadian story.
Sure. I think that it's changed over the years after doing this for 1,000,001 years. I like whatever keeps me on my toes. So, I've done front of house, I've done monitors, done all kinds of things like that, but I liked learning something new.
Ballet,
right? I get bored easily, so I like to try something that I'd never tried before, but maybe not ballet. So, recently, I'd say in the last number of years, I've really enjoyed monitor mixing, because it's something that I feel like a lot of bands don't get often enough. They always talk about how terrible their monitors were and how they couldn't hear anything and this sort of thing. And to be somebody who goes, well, how was it tonight? Oh, it was great, sort of thing, is really nice. And to try and learn why it is that they have such terrible experiences, especially on in-ears, figuring out how it is, what that person might actually be hearing, because what you hear is not going to be what they hear, and trying to eke out of them some sort of real description as to what it is they're really hearing, to find out what they want and what they need, or just giving them what I think they need and hoping that for the best. And, learning as you go along, what does a musician really want? What do they really need? And
which are not, sorry to interrupt, which are definitely not necessarily the same things. That was a big learning curve for me. It's like what they want and what they need. And even me, like as a performer on stage, that was a learning curve for me. What I want and what I need are probably not the same things.
The latest Signal to Noise podcast is about monitor mixing, and it's really, really good. There's some really interesting stuff in there. It's a British guy named Alex Cerruti is the main focus of the interview, but there's other people on there, and there's some really good opinions, but they really get into some really clever and right on observations about how to actually figure out what people want and need in their monitors, and sometimes it is what they're saying, and sometimes it's not what they're saying, and sometimes it's kind of the opposite of what they're saying. I highly recommend it. I think it's number 97, Signal to Noise number 97.
And sometimes it's not even anything audio related. Like
That's right.
early on in my touring, I toured with someone who decided to move on from her band and be a solo artist. And that first tour was rough because all of that anxiety that the band absorbed for her on stage was now all about the way she sounded, and she hated it. And I mean, it was, can't see at the fronts of any speakers, have to play upstage of the proscenium. I mean, just the monitor console, nothing sounded right until we brought back like the old monitor console that she grew up with, a 2800M, you know, which we all know doesn't sound that good, but it's like, you know, she remembered seeing that logo, and like those were good years for her, you know. And yeah, a lot of the time
you're absolutely right,
it's all
because
about trust.
a true consummate professional only needs a few things. They need themselves, what they're doing, honestly represented. They need pitch reference. They need time reference. Those are the only things that they actually really need.
And like the studio guys, most of those guys just want a CD quality mix of everything.
Right. And see, that's different though. That's about making them comfortable and happy in what they're doing. That's a different thing.
There's as many different needs and wants and monitor mixes as there is personalities. And it's so much about deciding or knowing that person and then having trust. So much of it comes down to trust. They see you behind the desk. I don't know how many people are just like, oh, you know, Andy's got it. It's okay, because they know me, or they know that it's going to be fine. I'm not going to blow their heads off. I'm not going to do this and that. And that's so much of it is trust. If they don't know who you are, a lot of times just building that trust is the very first foundation of it. And then you can start to talk about how's it going? What do you need? But if you don't have that trust, everything is wrong and they're afraid they can't perform as well. So much of that, you know.
That comes up in this Signal to Noise, which I just checked. It's number 94. Signal to Noise podcast, number 94. Check it out. It's got some very astute observations about monitor mixing.
There's
not that I would ever lead anybody away from this broadcast, but
so I have to, Jason, I'm going to jump right to you, but I do have to jump in and say, Aram, tell Chris he has to plug my show now.
Okay.
Like that's just turnabout, fair play, all that kind of stuff. So now Chris has to plug my show because I plugged his show. That's the way this goes. Jason, sorry, I interrupted you. You actually had something useful to say.
Well, as monitor engineers, I did it over 20 years on the road. All I did was monitors with big acts. And you run into all the time this awful situation where the performer is demanding that you do things to their mix that you know is making it worse for them. Like a singer who wants more bass guitar, and everyone in the building can hear that they're singing flat except for them, right? Or the acoustic player, more hi-hat, I need more hi-hat. When the hi-hat is crushing and the guy, it's fatiguing his hearing so much by the middle of the show that he can't discern the difference between his pick attack and the hi-hat anymore. And it happens constantly. And all you can do is what they ask you to do, you know, whether you know better
more
or
vocal
not.
And then turn the drums down. More vocal. Turn down the cymbals. More vocal. Turn down the cymbals. There's no drums in your mix. It's all in your vocal. Well, how come when I'm in front of my mic, I can hear myself, and then when I move away, it's too much drums? Well, how do you think a microphone works, my friend?
Yeah.
It's not a magic device that only picks up what you want. It picks up whatever is in front of it. Loudest sound wins, somebody once said.
Yeah, I feel like that's it. Loudest sound at the microphone wins pretty much no matter what you're talking about.
And Jason, also, like, how can you say things in a different way that'll ring true to the personality? And like, there's that movie of the famous singer who it's about his rehearsals right before his death, and they're in the middle of rehearsals and he rips out his in-ears and he's just like MFing the way they sound. but like in a weird way. And the art director, who brilliant idea, gets on the VOG and goes, "I'm sorry, artist. I didn't quite understand what you were saying. Could you please repeat it?" And it caused him to stop in his tracks. And he goes, "Well, there's just something wrong with my monitor mix." "Okay. Well, what do you hear?" "I don't know. It just sounds like a fist ramming my eardrums or whatever." "Okay. Hey boys, can we please turn his mix down a little bit?" "Michael, let us know how it is." Just sometimes it's just,
I spent a year with an artist who threw a tantrum every night. He would rip out his ear monitors and throw it across the stage. And he had this thing. It's funny. He shall remain nameless. He had this thing where he would, he had wedges and in-ears. And he would constantly go back and forth because he couldn't make up his mind. He was one of those guys. And he had them both all the time available to him. And the band was roaring loud all the time, like roaring loud. And the problem was, it was a band. There were 5 principals. There was no one boss. And the singer thought he was the boss. So the side fills are also screaming with band. And when you got this singer loud enough in the wedges to where you could even hear himself, and he would start complaining, "All I hear is distortion," and throw a tantrum. I didn't find out until years later. My friend, who was his front of house mixer, who stayed after I quit, one day went to the studio with the guy, and through the course of a few days of working on a project, came to realize that this singer, when he heard too much 2.5 kilohertz in his voice, he called that distortion. For years, he ran monitor engineers insane, complaining about distortion.
Well,
all it was that he was hearing too much 2.5K in his vocal, which happens to be the only thing that can cut through a roaring band.
It could have been distorting his ears, though.
Yes,
Right.
In his head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes back to trust that Andy talked about. That communication, that I know that when I speak to you, you understand what I'm talking about. Even hand signals as a monitor engineer. A sure way to a performer's heart is to pick up their hand signals right away, while they're trying to play an instrument. So
which is interesting, like I'm not trying to keep us on track, but just circling back, it's like, but it's, so much of when we talk about like, this is my favorite gig to do versus that my favorite gig to do or whatever, is, emotionally and it is cool to have, mixing monitors is that you have a personal relationship with people. It's very direct. It's very real. And there's just that feedback of, I've done it well, even if the feedback is just the band was like grooving and happy, and they completely ignored me for the whole freaking night. And then they went backstage and like, had 5 beers and hit the bus. And like, that was it. Like, like, that's probably one of my biggest, frustrations because I used to love mixing front of house, and now it's no longer really my favorite musical thing to do.
It's interesting because mixing front of house, I've had a lot of favorite jobs. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've done a lot of different jobs. Mixing front of house was never my favorite job.
Interesting.
I wasn't primarily a music mixer. So, that's where mixing front of house gets everybody off. When I've been a front of house mixer, it's mostly been as a corporate mixer. If I mixed bands, it's the party band at the banquet at the end of the gig. And sometimes that was fun. Sometimes it was a lot of fun. But what I really got off on was designing the system and making it work. I would have been happy going home after the load in, except I couldn't get paid for that. So to get paid, I had to.
I know that feeling, Mac,
because that's what the money was.
And that's the thing is, Mac, that's why you get into RF, because then you have to be there to monitor the show. Why do you think Jason and Ike like make the big bucks? It's because they're monitoring the show.
Yeah.
Like it's all a plot. Like, you know, they figured this out. It's like, oh, I can be the system guy, and then I have to stay.
Well,
for the
now
whole
I got
show.
a job where I can make
If I
big
could
bucks
do the
for reading a book.
coordination and go home, I'd be happy with that.
Well, and there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, what Ike and I are in charge of on a television broadcast, for instance, that's going to go out to millions of people. If that lav drops, there's nothing to mix. There's nothing to broadcast.
And obviously, if it's not clear to every single human within the sound of my voice, I am very, very kidding. You know, it's there's a reason why RF coordinators make good money, and if they're, you know, if they do their jobs right and the stars align, because sometimes they can do their jobs perfectly right and the stars still don't align. But
yeah, there's so much out of their control. I mean,
it's just, you know, but if the stars align, then they do get to sit in a hammock for the show and look at, you know, RF meters and go, great show at the end of thing. But there's a reason why you're there.
And the problem with it is too, is it's, if you're not a techie who enjoys pure tech, there's very little artistic about it, about that job. Well, I mean, there's some. Go ahead, Ike.
Well, I mean, so I've been waiting for my turn. I mean, I mixed front of house for years. I've had some great, even transcendent moments at front of house. I had lots of awful moments at front of house, and really the inconsistency of it, you know, some days it was good and some days it wasn't good, was kind of driving me crazy. The thing I like about doing RF and doing frequency coordination is it doesn't matter what comes out of the PA system. If all the mics work and all the in-ears work and all the intercoms work and all that stuff, I've had a great show. And particularly when you start doing award shows of some of the more popular acts and stuff like that, you know, it may not be the best music you've ever heard coming out of the PA. So I can do a show like that and still feel like tremendously artistically satisfied that I got all of the waves to work together. And I really get off on that now, because there's definitely an art to it. There's definitely a way to approach it to get everything to kind of mesh together and work together. And then there's also the challenges of when somebody comes up to you at the last minute and says, you know, I need one more frequency, and you go, let me see what I can do. Okay, here you go. Here's frequency number 301. Have a great show. And you know, like I really enjoy that kind of stuff. And so yeah, I mean, in some ways it's like having gone for like an extreme challenge, you know. I mean, I like shows with 300 frequencies on it, you know. It's like, it feels like it's something I can sink my teeth into. So and I do, again, kind of get artistic satisfaction out of having a coordination where everything works. And it's just that nobody can actually hear what you're doing except what they're, hearing out of a, singer's wireless mic, or, or the performers hear what's in their in-ears and that sort of thing. So
I will say I had the privilege relatively recently, not recently at all, because the pandemic has completely compressed time. Thanks for that. But to actually do a pure RF coordination gig, I've talked about it before because I've only done like a handful of them, but I do remember walking away from the gig literally, like very clearly, like I can remember like where I was, like walking towards my car, and after the gig, after the loadout, and I realized I have a weird feeling like this. What is this feeling? And it was that feeling of, that was perfect. Everything I did was exact, because there were no issues, there were no dropouts. There was an actual objective marker that I could literally get in the car and go, I missed not like, and which is for almost every other type of job that I do in audio, there's something I'm not happy about. There's something that I'm like, man, I upcut that a little bit, or I missed that a little bit, or I could have had that a little bit better, or that blend wasn't perfect. Like there's always something that I'm not 100% happy with, but a lot of it's subjective. It's like, the gig was fine. I got paid. They're going to hire me again. Like it's okay. But subjectively, I'm not super happy. But, if you're doing RF, it's like if they all worked, if every single time sound went into the capsule, it came out of the receiver. Awesome. Like, if every single in-ear mix worked perfectly and nobody had a glitch and nobody said, I'm getting break, like.
Well, and being an RF tech even it's a different job than RF coordinator, even though most of us do both. And, and I'll agree with Ike. If you're going to talk about artistic in that context, you can even go further with it. I mean, you could get very creative with where you place antennas so that you're not shooting through a video wall or choosing an antenna with a different pattern. And I equate that with tech, but because I don't see it the same way. I don't know. My philosophy of mixing was always painting different colors on a canvas. Was in my mind's eye. So I guess it depends on how you define artistic and what it means to you yourself.
Well, I felt that way too when I was mixing, but the trouble is that you were partially dependent on other people's skills, other people's attitudes, other people's I used to say, like, you could get up in the morning after a great night's sleep, have your favorite breakfast, a great cup of coffee, and go down there, and if the band had a fight on the bus, or one of them was hungover, or somebody's girlfriend was leaving them, or whatever, and they played like crap, then to a certain extent there's stuff that you can do as a mixer to try and get the feeling back to them, like if they're feeling the kick drum come off the room and going, yeah, okay, and sometimes you can kind of steer them out of that, but other times you're kind of dependent on your creative output for other people's creative output, and the RF thing kind of takes that out of the equation, because somebody could be singing terribly on a mic that's working perfectly. So
hey, I have a question.
Yep.
Do you remember back in the day of UAs, and I remember this with one specific major New Jersey based rock and roll band where the vibe on stage was pretty bad, and there's so bad there's two monitor mixers, and
not that we're naming names or anything.
There's only two bands it could be, so
I think we've got it. But go ahead.
And so the it was like, hey, like we need to RF coordinate this because you're coming into a corporate gig, and I remember they had J4s for like the guitar rig, and I was like, you have to change because like you're on BTR frequencies that just won't move, right? Or whatever. And the guy's like, I'm not changing. You're going to have to turn those off. And I'm like, well, why? Because 554 is what sounds best on that guitar. And I'm like, do you have any idea how this gear works? Because like there is a little bit of like, there is a little bit of science that supports that, but not enough that anyone's going to hear through a distorted Marshall guitar amp. So does that still exist? Because with Axient Digital, like there's the white noise thing with the older mic, and certain frequencies it's louder. Like, do you still run into that with some of these guys?
No, I haven't. I mean, I did a tour in 1984 where we had I think 4 wireless systems and like 3 Nadies and a Telex or something like that, all VHF. And one of the musicians was a complete pain in the ass about it was a theatrical type thing, and so they had to be wireless. And plugging an electric violin into a Nady probably didn't sound that good, but it was like, work with it, dude. And so I've had a little bit of that kind of pushback, my instrument doesn't sound good coming through. But again, that was like 1984. I can't think of a recent, even in the last 10 years or something, where somebody's from wireless world I did have a band where I rolled them frequencies, and they came back and said, well, I can't tune to those. And I said, why? And they said, well, they didn't actually say why, but he showed me a piece of P-Touch on the front of his receiver, for his, it was a backline guy. And I figured it out like years later, is I think that what happened is that the backline guys stage left and the backline guys stage right. And this is actually something that I suggested in one of my articles. It actually said, okay, you take the bottom end of Sennheiser G or whatever, and I'm going to take the top end of Sennheiser G. And when I rolled them frequencies, I didn't know that they had split themselves up that way. So when I gave the guy on stage right, a frequency that was, down, and he didn't want to tune to it.
And God forbid the stage left backline guy and the stage right backline guy, have a conversation or anything,
They don't even ride on the same bus.
Well, you know what? That's actually not a bad way. Like if you're doing many gigs that are not coordinated, it's not a bad way to make sure that you're not getting all up in each other's businesses, to just say, you take the lower end, I'll take the higher end or whatever. But the thing is if they had told me that that's why they had those restrictions on there, I could have just said, you know what, for this show, just roll with what I tell you to do and everything's going to be fine. But I mean, I didn't know that at the time. So I just went back and said, give me 5 minutes. Okay, here's your frequencies are above here. And it was only one of the guys that told me that. And I think that after working with this band like a number of times, I had like a picture of the front of the receiver, so I would remember every time I worked with these guys. But I think one time I was over on the other side of the stage and looked at like the bass rig and went, oh, okay, yeah, because that's a different set of numbers. So I think that that's what they were doing. So, but
it does go to that thing though about ultimately it's like we have to work with people. It's like, and we all have our own individual quirks and our own like, why are you what? Like we have to do what? Like it sounds better on that frequency, but to that person, it sounded better on that frequency. Like they were convinced.
Actually, sorry. Back to Pete's question for a second. So the first show that I had done for years, I had done up to about 30 frequencies, and I was using the old Vega DOS-based frequency coordination program. And then I got hired to do this gig, and there were going to be like 60, 70 channels of wireless. I was kind of freaking out. I had downloaded a trial copy of IAS and started doing my coordination, and then I lost it somehow. And so I ended up buying it like the night before the gig. So it was and it became like my first 60 plus channel coordination. And one of the acts needed 6 UHFR J5 frequencies or whatever. So I was in IAS and I was UHFR J5, and it spat out about 20 frequencies. And I go, oh, I'm going to take that one and 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 that one. So I picked, through the 20. And so the day of, we're setting up, and a guy comes over to me and he goes, and this is for the guitar rig, and he goes, can you give me like 6 frequencies that are all in a row? And I go, yeah, okay, sure. So I go back into IAS and I go UHFR J5 and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I take the first 6, and he comes back to me and he goes, no, can you give me like 6 frequencies that actually come one after another after another after another after another in the receiver? And I go, you mean like in group 1 or whatever? He goes, yeah, exactly. So now I was a little bit green at the time too. So I didn't know about the user group thing. So I said, okay, you give me the frequencies and I'll see if I can fit them into the coordination. And I did, and it all worked. And the reason he was doing that is because they had one channel for the guitar player who was also the act. they had one channel going back to the PA console and a ring of like 6 guitars and no set list. So he would go blah blah blah, and the guy would grab guitar number 3 and hand it to him, and then go 1 2 3 on the receiver, enter, and go to the third frequency that was in the receiver, right? And so
all the transmitters are working at the same time. They're all on all the time.
They're all on, but they're on 6 different frequencies, and the receiver he's just tuning the receiver.
I get it.
Pick up, and
kind of a good idea.
It's like changing channels.
You know, it's industrious.
Literally changing channels.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad.
Too bad you
idea.
can't change it with a MIDI change and a pedal. Well, that'd be great.
Yeah. Anyway, that was like a little loop in my first, like, I forget, it was like 68 frequencies or something like that, and anyway, it all went fine. Great show. Everybody was happy. I was having some of those "you'll never work in this town again" kind of self-doubts going into it in the morning, but it all came off. So
did you get many gigs where you have to do multiple coordinations per day? I've done one big coordination, which was a 3-day festival with 90 acts, and you could not make it work even through one day of 3 stages. And
CMA Music Festival every year.
Yeah,
multiple coordinations.
This was Panorama, which was supposed to be the New York version of Coachella. And
so
it was like 3 coords a day. And I did all the coordinations and then printed them on colored paper. And it was like in the schedule for each stage, the bands were circled, and it was green chord for this group, red chord for this, and blue chord for this. And because you had to fit at least one band into 2 different chords so that they could be the transition between the 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up working. Over 3 days, it was 9 coordinations for 3 stages.
Yeah, my Memphis in May is like that too. I think I was up to 4 coordinations per day for 3 days to make that happen. Yeah.
Oof.
Well, and that's where you get into back to what we were talking about a little bit, which is, is there an art to RF coordination? And yeah.
Well,
when you get to that level, there's an art to it. Like it's obviously there's a lot of tech involved, but there's also just at that point as a musician, I know an awful lot of what I'm doing on the fly is I'm just subjectively deciding, I like this note a little bit better than that note. I like this volume a little bit better than that. Neither one of them are better, but I'm just like, there's an art to it. And I think when you're talking about that level of, you're balancing so many variables that there is an art of and an experience level that goes to it. Aram, you were trying to jump in. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was jumping back to Jason's MIDI paddle comment because I looked real quick, and
of course you did.
The companion instance for the Shure stuff actually lets you set frequencies, so you could sit there and have a bunch of frequencies and jump between them if you really wanted to.
Yeah, and also again, if I'd known, I could have gone to the user preset or taken the guy to the user preset and put the 6 frequencies that I gave him the first time in there, and they would have shown up, U1, U2, U3, U4, U5, U6. But
it's crazy
my
now,
hands
though.
were
If
a little
someone came
full
up with that now,
day.
you could be like, oh, here, take this stream deck and just punch it, depending on what song you're on.
Just punch that. So, which just goes to show that if we just had a stream deck in 1992, all my mixes would have been better. I'm gonna. I did not keep a good track of who did what. Is there anybody that I had a great job and loved it and didn't share, or did I miss anybody? Anything? Nobody? Hands? No hands? Everybody?
I never shared the job I did like. I only shared the one I didn't like that was never my favorite.
Well, then there you go. Finish this off, Mac. Tell us what your favorite audio job is.
For 10 years, I was the cable management guy for Super Bowl. And I had notebooks with, this is all analog cable runs. We had like 40 different multi-cables run throughout whatever stadium we were in, with maybe 1,000, 1,200 channels of audio. And I was the keeper of all of the cable routing and all the cross patching in the rack room, where all these multi-cables came down to a rack room that was full of racks of patch bays. And that was it. That was a fantastic job. I love doing that.
And it's cool because it goes to that whole, there are so many different cool things to do in audio, and everybody just thinks the only thing to do is to sit in the middle of a concert and push faders up and down. And it's like, there's lots of cool things to do. I've done a lot of different ones, and that actually does sound cool to me. It sounds totally geeky and kind of totally cool.
Yeah, and you were really at the center of everything.
Oh yeah.
Nothing happened at Super Bowl.
And there's an art to it.
And extremely important. It's like, I mean, basically, like you're the patch person. Like that's it.
Yeah,
like,
I built all these FileMaker databases with hotkeys to add a 40 pair multi, so I could, add a 19 pair, add an 11 pair, and just they were 3,000 feet long.
And now we would do it with a Stream Deck and like Matty Patch or something.
Now, were those
Dante
Gepco cables or Rapco cables?
Do it with Dante or some equivalent, some network audio.
I think the thing I find is common about the things that everybody loves generally seems to be situations that you have complete control over, or as much control as possible.
Yeah.
The least enjoyable ones are the ones where you walk into somebody else's nightmare and try to make heads or tails of it. And if you can, it's fulfilling, but it's nowhere near as much fun as speccing it yourself and being 100% in control. When somebody comes up to you and says, "I'd like to do this," you say, "No, it's done this way." Those are the best gigs and the ones that are the most enjoyable, where you've controlled it all and it all works out. The ones where you have no control and yet you're expected to do miracles, those are nightmares. I always hate those ones.
My current favorite is mixing corporate audio in a TV studio, where I deal with 2 faders at a time and I can read a book while I'm working.
There you go.
And nobody, go ahead, Andy. Andrew.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't really get a chance to say, but I was going to say that what Andy said, when you have all the control, and then there's the surprise gig, which is like not some high profile thing for me. Sometimes it's like I mixed the Klezmatics in Yerba Buena Gardens in San Francisco, and I know the Reeds player. He's married to a very good friend of mine. And I just went up and said, "Hey, Matt, that was great." But that I love ethnic shows like that. Indian music's fun too, but the Klezmatics were fun because they just start playing. They're amazing. They got everybody up and dancing. I was into it, and it was just a groove, and I didn't expect that. It just happens, and that's nice. That's my favorite kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of Andy and I's topics in the future will be, kind of like favorite gig that just sort of happened, or like favorite show that just sort of happened. I have a long involved story about mixing for the dance band that turned out to be Tito Puente with Carlos Santana sitting in for 3 hours. And it's like, that's not a dance band. I guess you can dance to it, but that's a little bit bigger than when we first started, the employee bands doing Mustang Sally. Like, that's a little bit better. Anyway, I'm going to get us off the stream. I think we came full circle in a great way. But thank all of you guys for being here. We'll stay here after everybody leaves. So just hang out for a second, and I totally hosed that. I'm going to do it again.
Well, something went away.
I still hosed it. Whatever. Stop that.